Welcome to the 4 Habits podcast, where we help you build relationships that thrive at home, at work, and in life. We're Dr. Andrea and Jon Taylor-Cummings, and every week we bring you actionable insights to create meaningful connections and lasting success. So let's dive in.
So today we want to have a really courageous conversation with sensitivity and without judgment on what would it take to heal marital breakdown and avoid the pain and often haunting regrets of divorce. We recognize that there are cases where divorce is inevitable, but we want to explore what if there was another way. And we're delighted to invite Pamela Henry to join us in this conversation as somebody who's walked the journey and has some great insights to share. So welcome, Pamela.
Thank you, Jon and Andrea, for inviting me on the show today about this topic so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. Thank you for being vulnerable, and we look forward to diving in. But before we do, as everybody knows, we want to give you your proper introduction. So Jon's going to take us through that just now.
My bit, and always love doing this. All right. So Pamela Henry is an author, parenting educator, and founder of Soul Custody Press. A divorced mother of 3, Pamela brings a deep personal lens to one of the most painful challenges families face: divorce. Her groundbreaking book, Soul Custody: Sparing Children from Divorce, explores the hidden toll marital breakdown takes on children and the haunting regret that often follows. With a background in supervised visitation programs and a passion for writing that heals, Pamela has dedicated her work to uncovering why couples give up and how they might instead choose a path that preserves both love and legacy. Her message is a heartfelt call to action. Before walking away, consider what's really at stake and what it would take to make healing possible. She empowers couples and parents to break cycles, reflect deeply, and protect the next generation from avoidable heartache. So, Pamela, your book is titled Soul Custody. What does that mean, and why did it become such a central idea for you?
Well, it started out before I got married in 1990, when I wanted to heal from my own childhood divorce. The title came to me as just a manuscript, a journal that I was writing to try to get over my divorce issues from childhood so that I could actually get married. And that I did. I did stay married 15 years, but when it was my turn to divorce, and the manuscript turned into something else. It turned into effective co-parenting. And then I never published that book either. But just last summer, it became something quite different. I wanted to write a book that would have kept me married and pour all my regrets into lessons from married couples, because all these years later, having been 15 years married, now 15 years divorced, I really realized that I made a huge mistake, and I wanted to go back and make it as right as I could. And this book in this last year made it as right as I could.
Well, you used the language there. You said, when it was my turn to get divorced. I heard that. What do you think might have happened differently or could have done differently? Or do you think that was inevitable based on the sort of the damage that I guess that was done to you and you were living that out? Or
Well, here's the thing. What I came to realize is that I divorced for all the wrong reasons. I really found that, as enlightened as I thought I was, I thought I had God. I thought I had, the therapy. I thought I had the understanding of everything, but I still repeated the divorce legacy, even down to the age of my mother being 43 with 3 children, just like me. The very age that my parents divorced. It was like stepping into a cookie cutter without knowing it. But my reasons were faulty. They were about, I did not link it at the time. My wanting to get out of the marriage was wanting to avoid painful childhood issues that were being forced to be faced in the marriage that I was not willing to face. So I made the marriage the problem and did what I called an escapist divorce. If you
Wow.
leave the marriage, you think you can avoid the issues that were following you. So I went back in writing to put the dots together to see what exactly where I went wrong and what I would have wanted to do differently. That was the part that was the most healing, is discovering what I would rather have done instead and being able to share those lessons with other people. For example,
Yep.
I did the opposite. I did the opposite of your 4 healthy habits. Okay. I was
Okay.
critical, not curious. I was crushing by divorcing, not careful. I was assuming, did not ask for help or ask any questions. And I disconnected before I even had a chance to connect and correct. So if you look at it that way, it's a recipe for divorce when you have a single track mind. But I do have compassion for myself because now I understand what went wrong from a spiritual perspective, from a psychological perspective. I didn't have enough help. I didn't have enough of a relationship with God that was going to see me through, and not enough awareness, because just alone, one of the statistics in my book that I think is the most shocking is that there's a longevity study from 2009 that showed that children of divorce live 4 years longer than children that come from intact families.
Mm-hmm.
I think if someone had told me that, I might have perked up. But in my case, very important example, I did not think that emotional affairs counted as cheating, but they actually do. In my case, it took me emotionally out of my marriage. I also did not piece it together that the reason I was in emotional affairs is because my father had just rejected me because I confronted him about childhood abuse. And I did not put together the juncture of me checking out and trying to escape that reality, when really it wasn't about my poor spouse at all. It was about me in this juncture and then not surviving that hurdle. And the sad part is, Jon and Andrea, is for 15 years in counseling and therapy, even without a strong God bond, because both of us were not active Christians at the time, we came through some major hurdles from our childhoods and we healed them together. So we had a good framework. I'm telling you, the one time you check out in an emotional affair type of way, that's the temptation that can do you in. It's not the 10 you overcame and didn't indulge in, it's the one you do indulge in. And in my case, there were 3 separate relationships I had going that, even though they weren't of a physical nature, they gave me the unnecessary anesthesia to not face what was going on with me. And that's throwing your children under the bus for your own issues. And so I was sad about that. But going back, I felt like I was able to uncover the roadmap of what I wish I would have done instead. So,
wow, you've there's so many things that you've brought into this conversation that are so real for others. You know, child abuse, parents that divorce, not being able to face the things that are still painful in your own life, and kind of projecting that onto problems in the relationship, in the marriage,
and emotional affairs.
and emotional affairs. What is it that you have learned that you could have done differently, and how did you get to the stage of healing that you have to be able to look back with such clarity?
Okay, yes. Okay, so only through a strong relationship with the Lord was I able to face the real truths about my own behavior. So that was critical. It took me 5 years till after the divorce to become a Christian and even entertain the concept of what adultery in the heart is. So I was a long time away from having the spiritual understanding. So that's what gave me the courage to look at things. But what I wished I had done different, which is the whole premise of my book, is to spare the children from divorce, because it was the worst part of my childhood. And yet I didn't consider that it might be also the worst part of my children's childhood if
Yeah.
I was going to enact this. But
Mm.
that's the state of mind of selfishness that I was in, not thinking about the children, how they feel about the marriage, what they get from the marriage. The fact that we were a good couple, we did not have abuse or a lot of the situations of safety that would be a concern for parents not being together. There was no addiction. There was no maltreatment of
Mm.
each other.
Mm.
So it was a purely escapist kind of divorce. And it was essential to think about how the children's worlds really do fall apart when the parents get divorced. And if I could have used my own history, I kept thinking I was going to do divorce better than my parents, and that would be the key. But the way to do divorce better than your parents is to not divorce at all. I
Mm.
passed on the legacy of divorce.
The,
Um,
the, yeah, interesting you put it like that. I mean, I've heard certainly people in the past have said, you know, if the relationship is a stormy relationship, if there's a lot of arguing and shouting and so all kinds of bad behavior in the relationship, then clearly that ain't great for the children. So maybe divorce can be a good thing. But it sounds like your experience was nothing like that at all. It was a decent relationship, maybe not the strongest, but the relationship, the environment that the children was in was a fine home. There was no issues there. So for them, they went from like an average home to a divorce and out of home and two homes and all that kind of stuff. So for them, must have been quite traumatic. What might you have done differently for the children? Thinking about the children, how might you have handled that differently for them?
I would have waited. I would have considered separation instead of divorce. If that's what I needed, if I needed to get away from myself, then I needed to make space.
Mm.
But I don't know any married couples that survive periods of trouble that wished they ever got divorced. And so I wish somebody had said to me, divorce is not an option, so let's think about other alternatives. I was very single-minded. So I wished I had stayed just for the children, and that someone would have said, it's okay and necessary for you to stay just for the children. We'll work out your issues over time. Just trust that the right thing to do is to keep the family together. And that different framework, I would have stayed for them. If nothing else, that would have been the thing. That's what he wanted to do.
Mm.
And I was just of a different mindset, and I didn't know that was going to be, proven to me later years to be a
Mm.
mistaken mindset. It's very confusing for children if there are parents like me where there are not obvious issues. It's some ways it's even more confusing because they don't understand why their parents are separating. It's
Mm.
more apt that they would think they did something wrong because
Yeah.
there is nothing wrong evidently outwardly to point to. And so it makes them distrust relationships in the future. It does so many things to kids. The overwhelming sadness that I saw my kids go through, even though we had 50-50 custody and an ideal situation, I would say, for a divorced couple, you can't escape the trauma of divorce no matter how good you do it.
Yeah.
And the trauma of divorce alone is worth staying married for.
Mm.
So that's the point I'd like to pick up on, because there's a lot of pushback to the idea of staying married just for the sake of the kids. And
Yeah.
as Jon said, if there's a lot of turmoil and conflict, the research shows that that does more harm to the kids than separating, even though I think the long-term effect is still debatable.
Mm-hmm.
But to this idea of staying in it for the kids, help us unpack that. Why is it a good idea to push through for the sake of the kids, even though, of course,
Well,
4 years extra of living is a good place to start.
prolong their lives.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is if I had stayed married for the kids, I might have gotten to my issues without divorcing. I might have put the pieces together. At least it would have bid me time. Now, I will say, people think our third child was a mistake because she came along right at the time of the divorce. We had our baby. But what happened was we were in counseling one day. This should have been the biggest clue to us. We were in counseling one day and we said, we want to have another baby. And we were in the midst of divorce discussions. And she goes, that never works. You can't just have a baby to think it's going to fix your marriage. But actually that was wrong, because we bought ourselves a whole nother year and we have this beautiful third child out of our efforts to stay married, which our effort was have another child, we'll stay married. That was the biggest clue that you should stay for the children. That was actually the best year, because it was so wonderful to have that third child. He came around and wanted to have a third child, even though we were in the midst of our divorce discussions. And that was the biggest clue to stay for the children, because of what a great experience our third child was. A for effort, but we should have stayed longer for them, or I should say I should have. And I feel so badly because some of the women in my situation who are clueless about really why they're wanting out of the marriage. This is why I wrote this book, because if I was that clueless, I think there might be other people that were that clueless about their desire to be out of the marriage. And so staying for the children buys the person who wants out of the marriage time to see that their issues may not be about their spouse or their marriage, but could solely be about them. And then then you come around. I mean, one thing I know even from 15 years of marriage is that it's like 18 different relationships from the start of the marriage to how it goes. And so I just didn't weather number 19,
Yeah.
So what's really interesting, firstly, that you're going through divorce and you still consider having a baby together. I mean, that's a clue that there's a lot of friendship, a lot of strength going for the relationship, or a lot to be said about the relationship that you have. But there's this thing about, yes, it buys you time, but one of our messages is that if you do nothing with that time, if you don't spend the time to learn more and build your skills and understand what's going on and develop just be equipped to have the tough conversations you need to have to really move forward in the relationship, then the time just passes and you end up being in exactly the same place.
You've just kicked the can down the road.
I have the conversations in therapy in my mind all the time. I should have just said, hey, I'm having emotional affairs. Can we talk about this? I'm totally checked out and preoccupied. Hey, instead of a divorce, I want to go have an affair. I should have been honest about those things. Instead of ask for a divorce, I should have said in counseling, I want to go have an affair. I want to go make it physical. Those are the kinds of things those are the tough conversations I didn't have. I should have been honest with my spouse about what I wanted to do. Instead, I asked for a divorce so I wouldn't have to say those things in therapy. That's part of the regret.
It's a tough conversation. So just to be clear, are you saying you think it would have helped if you went and had a physical affair?
No, it would have helped if I had just told
spoken about it, been honest
that I wanted to. Like, I didn't even think that was an option. Like maybe I would have gotten to the issues underneath of why I wanted to go have the affair. Because long before, all of our issues would be, they all go back to dad somehow. Maybe somehow it would have come out that gosh, maybe you're wanting to leave me because your father just rejected you for confronting him about childhood abuse. So it was important to realize that I fell short in the amount of honesty I brought to the relationship. So instead of I checked out instead of checking in further for greater truth. One thing about marriage, which I totally respect now, is you got to continually bring the truth to the table.
Yeah.
It isn't a one-time thing. And
Fine.
plus, he was ready to forgive me for those emotional affairs. They hadn't even become physical until after I asked for a divorce. So even to that point, I had not cheated in the physical sense, but felt that I needed to get out. There was no grace for me being that way. It's like just because I wanted an affair meant that I had no right to be married anymore in my mind. You know, the guilt and the shame was already there. But that's what adultery in the heart does when it's of an emotional nature. It'll take you out. That's why I think the Lord said it starts with just the thought.
The thought.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it is.
I'm conscious that your children are possibly, I'm doing some quick maths in my head here, they're probably not, they're getting to the age where they're going to have to be starting to think about their own relationships and so on. They're kind of just getting there. What kind of conversations have you had with them to make sure that this cycle doesn't repeat itself?
In the course of the book, the eldest daughter forgave me for leaving her dad. In the course of writing the book, this is why writing is so healing, and me going back somehow really helped heal my family. Even my children's father forgave me like a week before the book was published.
Wow.
It was just such a beautiful thing. And he hadn't read it yet, even though I gave it to him 3 months before. But the thing is what's so beautiful about it is that Judith Wallerstein, in a study, the Unexpected Legacy of Divorce, did a 25-year study. She said problems will hit the divorced children when they are in their early 20s and starting to form and think about forming their lasting partnerships in life. And so none of my 3 children are married yet. And yes, I regrettably passed on the divorce legacy, but now I'm passing on my lessons learned as kind of a negative template for what not to do. Lessons mom learned from having left, which she considers a mistake. Lessons for married couples that include my future children being future married couples. They'll have my lessons as well. And that's really meaningful to me, because if there was ever a purpose for regret, it has to be that it's instructive. Not only for me to change and do things the right way, but for other people to avoid the pitfalls that we hope they don't fall into.
Yeah, I can tell, we can tell you've been on an amazing journey of healing and reflection and introspection, and your faith, your newfound faith, new meaning after the divorce, has certainly helped to give you a new set of values, a new framework for looking at things. You, a couple of sentences ago, said this brilliant line that we must always bring the truth to the table in marriage, which I think is just a wonderful way to say we have to talk about the tough stuff. Of course, you need to, we would say, make sure you're developing the skills to have that conversation really well. What else? What other nuggets, whatever other insights have you discovered that you'd want to share with your children about to be married, or with married couples who might be struggling right now and thinking about divorce? What other insights?
I think I really cannot stress enough the idea of, I don't know how to say this, but never think you have enough God. Because I had pride going. I thought I had God in my pocket. I thought God wanted me to divorce. I really, no. I used God as a justification to divorce. And that was a huge error. So I think whatever presence God plays with a marriage cannot be underestimated in terms of its importance. I'm surprised we lasted 15 strong years without having God at the center of our marriage. That shows you how strong God is. But also too, my favorite piece of advice comes from Timothy Keller, the late Timothy Keller. don't look to your partner for what only God can do. And then I would add the PS and find out all that God can do as part of that personal quest to,
Mm,
find out what that means. That the partner is not God.
Yeah,
That's important because there could be no God, or it could be the partner is all God, and either
yeah,
one's a recipe for disaster. When I
indeed.
texted my three daughters your four healthy habits, those are the kinds of things that we can do as parents, no matter what we left our children as far as a legacy.
mm,
It's never over, especially as they're adults. We can always continually feed them the things we wish we were fed. And
Yeah,
so I fed them the four healthy habits one day, and they're like thumbs up, right on, and they're armed with skills. And these are the things they want to know. Like you said, how do I continually bring my authentic self to this relationship? So that I'm not checking out or checking under, or even if I do, there should be ground rules for checking back in and
yeah,
how to check back in.
yeah. And how to keep the emotional conversation going, keep updated with what's going on in each other's head and heart. And sometimes
Yes.
just the business of life can
mm.
erode that. Um, so much that I want to ask, but I have to ask this question. I know it's probably on the audience's mind. With all the learning that you've done and the forgiveness that you've had, what does the future look like for your family? Is there hope of restoration, or what does restoration look like for you?
Oh, okay. So restoration has been fully completed in myself, because I did, on a number of occasions, attempt reconciliation over the years. And after the third time, he said, "You can stop asking now." so, so I gave it the go over the years to try to actually reconcile, which was a wonderful experience. To bring my heart back to the marriage and say, I know it's late, but is there a
Mm,
chance? Three separate times, not just once. And
Mm,
the Lord showed me that to reconcile my heart to the marriage, that was enough, and to
mm,
be reconciled to the Lord is enough. But there was a caveat in there for me. I discovered that for me, because of my history and the way that it went, that remarriage for me would actually be adultery. And if you read my book, you'll understand that my successive relationships were all adulterous. And I think there would be hope one day for me to be remarried if he is no longer alive, which is fine. But I do believe he was the one husband I was given. And so I'm perfectly content to remain unmarried. And the neat thing is that while he moved on and remarried someone else, and she is a wonderful stepmother, and my daughters love and adore her. We split Mother's Day 50-50 kind of thing. Um, that the family feels whole because of the great co-parenting job that my children's father and I were able to forge because we love our children so much. So even though we didn't spare them from divorce, thanks to me, we did give them the best co-parenting job that I personally have ever seen.
mm,
And so it's the best we could do under the circumstance, but we tried really hard. So I see that the family is whole in the context of our children being um, whole and wholesome human beings, and we've poured our love into them. But the family is a the custody schedule ends when she turns 18 at the end of May. It ends, but the
mm,
family is really the children, and so there isn't the marriage there. But I never want them to forget that they came from such love, and they came from such a strong marriage, because when it was strong, it was strong.
mm,
yeah,
mm.
But
yeah,
it just didn't last through some limitations that I go into
some,
detail about.
some of the storms. It sounds like you have very amicable relationships between yourself and your ex and with the children and so on. I don't know if this language helps you at all, but there was another guest we had on a while ago who said, this whole language of having step parents and stepchildren and so on sounds very negative. And so she came up with the language of bonus. This is
Bonus.
so your kids now have a bonus mom. And
Yes.
I don't know if that helps at all, but certainly in terms of the positive spin on the language used, I thought that was useful. So
Yes, very.
what's your legacy? What's the legacy that you hope to leave? Is it through the writing of the book to share your story, your journey, so others don't go down the same path? What's the desire? What's the dream here?
It's a wonderful question, Jonathan, because I just wrote to the very first therapist who helped me through my own childhood divorce issues. And I said, guess what? I understand what you were saying. She said, Pamela, your writing, your history, your life, that's not the legacy. You are the legacy. And I thought, I get that now, because they get me as the legacy. Like I, as their mother, I am the legacy. It's not what I leave behind. And it's not even my lessons learned or what I did or what I didn't do, but my love for them and who I am today as a result of all my experiences and everything I learned. The person I am today is the legacy. Like if I were to drop off after this podcast, they have me and my love for them as the legacy, my imprint on their life. And luckily I discovered that I am not the sum total of my mistakes. I am much larger than that. My imprint on their life is probably bigger than they can articulate. And I just want to make sure that from here on forward, I'm being the best self I can be in God for them for the remainder of their adult lives.
I think that's really beautifully put, because what we see in front of us is somebody who is enthusiastic and has the joy for life and has such an open heart towards your ex, towards his wife now, towards your children, with no apparent bitterness or resentment. And that would have been a huge learning journey. And I think what I'm hearing and getting from you is, if only that journey of growth and personal development could have been done inside the marriage rather than outside the marriage. Is that right?
Yes, Andrea. And I really do believe it could have been done inside the marriage, because now that I see what was lacking and what I needed, I see it as totally doable. But that's part of the healing, is to come to the discovery that it was workable. That was part of the healing. That it had potential that I didn't exercise. And that actually was healing. Didn't add to the regret. It healed the regret.
Yeah. Didn't know at the time, and you just had to deal with what you had.
Right.
But I think that's your story is such a powerful example of the importance of facing up to what's going on and getting the help. Sometimes we're so hesitant to get the therapy or the counseling or the conversations we need to have with somebody professional and with our spouse to get the help to keep those conversations going.
That's right.
That's definitely part of how can we heal together rather than using divorce as a solution that brings its own legacy of problems.
Yes.
There was a question in there, but I just found myself sharing thoughts and reflections.
Well, I'm keen to know, in your journey of discovery, I guess over the last 15 years, so post-divorce now, is there any relationship advice that you've come across? Any particular nuggets that you would then say, this is really what I want other people to know? If you're in a relationship and you're going through tough times, guys, you want to be doing this. Is there anything like that?
Yeah. I wasted so much time pursuing proper Christian relationships. I should have just been a mom. But I was really trying to redeem something I felt I lost. I was trying to recreate something I felt I deserved. Way too much preoccupation because I really became the best mother when I just said, I am not even going to date. And then I really found that I was a better person overall in every way, shape, and form, because my path was not meant to be to find the right person. I had the right person, and it wasn't about second best or finding someone to replace that person. There was way too much searching, and I see so many, and I did it, so I know, jumping into relationships one after the other, unsuccessful post-divorce, which really it furthers the damage on the children. When they say wait a year to date until after you're married, that's just a thing I heard that I never paid attention to. There is validity in there worth examining, because I didn't get that until much later. So these past 3 years for me, without dating, without seeking, without searching, the secret is God is enough. That's the secret I discovered that I wished I'd known from the beginning, and I would have really done better early on post-divorce had I practiced that back then.
Yeah, the danger is, I guess, that we're looking for other people to fill something that's missing in us, which, they can't, because
Never going to be able
they're
to.
not God.
Exactly.
They come with their own flaws and shortcomings and so on. So we need to find our own path to becoming whole ourselves.
Yes.
To,
So I'm
to
slow
have
to
it to offer.
the discovery, but at least I found it in time enough to
Yeah.
practice it.
Yeah, indeed, and to model it,
Mhm.
for girls.
Yeah.
Find
Right. Good
yeah,
point. They can see mom has done the best ever in the last 3 years for sure.
yeah. Well, they'll certainly have that to hold on to, won't they? There's no mistake that you can't come back from, because mom's walked this tough path and has
Right.
found her way to being whole again.
And I thought I needed to be a good marriage example for them. Well, let dad do that. Let him have he's setting the example for them on staying married now. And that's fine. I don't need to do that. That won't be my path. It wouldn't be right for me, according to me, in my relationship with God right now.
Yeah. I love how you found a real anchor in your faith. What would you say even to your girls now about how to include faith as part of their anchor, their healing, their way forward in life?
Well, I think in the reading of my book, which they have done, my girls, they can see the role that it plays for me. And I've tried to impart so far that the partner is not God, and that the idea that there needs to be some sort of faith if you're approaching marriage, because even the wedding vows are a commitment before God. And so as a couple, before you're married, you want to examine your issues of faith. Like, I really wished I had premarital counseling that challenged my false beliefs about God even before marriage. And so I've already, all three of them are in committed relationships. So I've already said, make sure when you have premarital counseling that it includes the God element, either what you believe or don't believe. All these things will make a huge difference in how you approach your marriage.
Absolutely. We always say that have the faith conversation, not saying you should have a faith, but you actually have a faith in something. So talk about what it is that's your anchor in how you make decisions, how you deal with grief, how you make choices about what you want to do in life and the impact that you want to have. All those things come from some place of faith, and you want to have the conversation to know what page you're on. Of course, as committed Christians ourselves, we would talk about the faith in Christ because of the forgiveness we receive from him, and can therefore forgive ourselves and forgive others, which is such an important process to keep going through in marriage, because we'll fall short. We'll let each other down at some point. What else have you discovered as nuggets that, in the last few minutes, if you wanted to share one thing, one more thing
I think the one more thing is that never let your personal issues be like, putting the children first means putting their well-being before your personal issues. Like, my personal issues are going to be there regardless, right? I needed to be more self-sacrificing. I needed to put my children's well-being before my perceived well-being of myself and my own issues. My children, my former spouse, paid for my unresolved childhood issues. There's no doubt about that. And so the advice is really put the children's well-being before your own personal issues, which will be there before, during, and after their well-being is put first, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. It sounds like also get some counseling to deal with those childhood issues that you separate the two and get, that's an issue.
The two. Yes.
We'll get some work on that.
Yes, because we don't want the children to pay for the sins of the father.
Yeah.
As they say.
Literally, right?
Yes.
So Pamela, how do people connect with you, find out about you? There's a website.
How do they get the book? Let's see the book.
How do they get more information?
Yes, the book is on Amazon, Soul Custody, Sparing Children from Divorce. It's also on Ingram Spark for booksellers and libraries. My website is soul-custody.com. That's the best way to keep in touch with me.
Okay, and we'll put that in the show notes.
With all our friends that we have that are going through trouble with divorce when they have kids, it's a great book to recommend, because we often wonder, what can we say? Well, recommend a good book.
Yeah, indeed. Wow. We knew that one would be going deep. Thank you for being so open, so vulnerable, and so passionate about talking about this. What's the work that you do with people? You mentioned doing, is it co-parenting classes?
Well, I have a group called Club 30. This is based on the 30% who regret divorce, because I really believe that a lot of people who regret divorce can minister to married couples about their lessons learned. So I'm trying to develop a kind of a ministry of people who are willing to talk about their regrets for the benefit of people staying married.
Right. Awesome. And that we can add to the show notes as well, so people know how to get in touch with you. Well, Pamela, thank you for being so open, for speaking so vulnerably. And, we're really grateful for the pain that you've turned into this passion of helping people to just reflect and reconsider before pressing go on divorce. Such a powerful message for such a time as this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jon and Andrea, for what you represent and your mission.
Well, thank you. And to our audience around the world, we say thank you for tuning in yet again. Some great insights here, some things to maybe share with people around you who may be going through challenges, as Pamela says. Maybe recommend a book. If you don't know what to say, give them a book, something to read, to just help them reconsider their steps before they press that nuclear button.
Yeah, and separate. I like that point that you made towards the end. Separate the issues, what you're having to deal with, from the impact it's going to have on your children and the legacy, and really think about what else you can do to deal with the issues without leaving an unnecessary impact. If you're not, your life's not in danger, you're not in a dangerous marriage.
And that's an interesting, useful caveat to put in there. If it is dangerous, then of course there are other considerations here. But if that's not the case, then absolutely forget about self here. What's more important here? What can you do for the children? So I think with that, it's a wrap.
Yeah, it's a wrap.
Until the next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the 4 Habits podcast. Now, if today's episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget, take our free relationship skills quiz at the4habits.com/ skills quiz to start improving your relationships today. Hit subscribe and we'll see you next time.